What's up, chat gang? Meph in truck here, the supremest authority on any topic you would listen to a man talk about things in a truck about. Today, I'm going to actually talk about not politics. We're talking about Cyberpunk 2077, which is political adjacent. Punk has always been, if you watch my episode of Rantcast with the Alex G, to some, the other Alex G if you're in the here in the Midwest. But In Your Phases Alex G was on there. We talked about Punk and Age of Sigmar, which are some cool corollaries between certain chaos and order and death characters and punk songs or punk rock. And we gave a little bit of a lesson about what punk is. If you watch that, I mentioned that, there are two things that are kind of critical to what punk itself is. Now, the most important thing to try to remember is punk itself isn't an aesthetic. It really is marketed as such these days. It's become a fashion of sorts. Don't even get me started on steampunk, throwing gears on your trench coat and calling it punk. Okay. I said don't get me started. But nothing against you if you're big into steampunk. But it has certainly gone more the cosmetic route and moved away from what punk sort of philosophically is. Punk is supposed to be, one, the DIY ethos. So if you are throwing the cogs on the trench coat yourself, boom, you're doing it yourself, right? But the other really critical aspect of that is that you're subverting a norm. Punk rock very, very specifically sought out to undermine what was essentially popular music at the time. The arena rock was very, very much in their crosshairs, where it took a huge technical acumen to put on these massive arena rock concerts with the hair band, the hair metal bands and stuff like that. They liked the idea that you could set it all up yourself, the DIY ethos, in a bar, teach yourself guitar, and just rock. Now, it took on political messages. A lot of punk has a lot to say about society and the subversion of the sort of status quo. So these are really core. And you could argue, chicken or the egg type thing on punk literature and punk poetry as their own genres and their own archetypes. Whether the rock and roll came first or punk came out, but certainly we didn't coin literature as punk until the 70s, and poetry and such. I think we could talk about how, even George Orwell, was subverting the norm, and Aldous Huxley more poignantly. A lot of great fantasy authors that were sort of subverting our expectations of society, and there's nothing more DIY than writing your own fiction, right? So, without splitting hairs on that, we have this notion of do-it-yourself ethos and subverting, right, the cultural norms. Cyberpunk, then, being an offshoot of that, is going to feature, cybernetics, cyberware. We can talk about the difference between technopunk and cyberpunk. Usually cyberpunk has a retro quality to it, that retro future where it looks like the 80s future. That's very much a stylistic thing. And there's a huge cultural norm being subverted in there that has often a lot to do with humanism, or transhumanism is usually a big theme. Are we still human if we're totally robots, or are robots humans if they have AIs, so on and so forth, right? You have another major trope is often that dystopia of the future where technology kind of shifts our agency away. And so we subvert that. And a big theme in all of it is thought control, right? I mean, there's this great scene in Minority Report, the Tom Cruise flick based on Philip K. Dick book, where he's walking by and the cameras catch his eye and they tailor the advertisement directly to him, and they say his name and they put him in the photos of the holograms and stuff like that. There's a great scene like that. Of course, he has to have his eyes swapped out in some sweet black market surgery. Awesome scene. But Sorry, spoiler. I'll leave a spoiler alert in the down there part in the description of this video. But the point is like this thought controller or advertising. There's always usually this big. There's a really really great scene in Blade Runner, the new one, where the sad robot is just kind of standing there, and this larger than life hologram leans down and like really capitalizes on his sad robot loneliness, and he goes out and he buys a robot waifu, and it's such a beautiful scene, and it speaks to my soul because I love stuff that features sad robots. But like, what is Mephisto's archetype of story? Favorite story? Sad robot stories. but I digress. So like, yeah, advertising. Now, Cyberpunk, rounding this out, bringing this home, Cyberpunk 2077 sold 8 million copies before the game existed. And it did it on the strong back of pretty fantastic advertising. You can't take away from, like, the effort they put in. I think about, like, Wendy's. Wendy's has a really, really strong social media presence. Snarky Wendy's, anime, like, tsundere anime girl Wendy's. And it's really, really fantastic, like Wendy's Takedown Day, like as a hashtag that happens periodically, or like Wendy's Roast Me, and it's pretty awesome, right? Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt Red took that to 11. They were really, really sort of compelling in their advertising, and I'm not just talking about some questionable decisions regarding trans rights and stuff, but whether it was predatory or off, I'm not even going to go into that. That's people smarter than me that know a lot better about it. I'm sure the Jimquisition has a great bit on it. But like even things like, don't worry, no microtransactions. Don't worry, no loot boxes here. And just like really going after AAA gaming whilst themselves being a AAA game. Like a lot of really, really strong advertising. And they really sort of tapped into this snark. And it's really interesting because for something billed as Cyberpunk, they are all the things punk kind of hates, especially Cyberpunk. Big digital dystopia markets you video game that is successful systemically before you even buy it or before it's even out. You have bought it. Boom. 8 million copies. 8 million people buying it. That's not Cyberpunk. That is the opposite of Cyberpunk. Now, I'm not saying the game's good or bad. I haven't played it yet. I'm sure it's great. At a certain amount of money thrown at a video game with a certain amount of time and crunch as this one has had, it's pretty impossible for it to truly be a bad game, right? We have a certain standard of production in video games right now that I think we take for granted, especially when we're like lambasting. And I'm super guilty of this. I lambast AAA games all the time. I'm very much love more in the indie game side of things. So you have these like this standard of quality. It's not going to be a terrible game. It's not going to be bad. It's doing some stuff that I usually kind of like cringe at when I see, I'm like, oh, open world, that means its story's going to be diluted. Build your own character usually means that it can't have a focused story on your character's narrative. It's got to be on that. But, those are things that have been pleasantly subverted before. Mass Effect has a really strong, feels like a focused story. It's about Shepard, but it's about your Shepard, right? Like, that's a fantastic, the way that they tackled that and that sort of, hey, nebulous hero and or villain, how are you doing today? Like, that sort of, when you get to custom create your own character, that's usually the bad type, and we often get that. Bloodborne and the Souls games address it by, your character isn't important to the story. This is about the world and the world building, the world's story that you just happen to be experiencing. Your character's an interface for that. So there's some ways that like that's tackled really well, but usually it's the bad kind. It's the nebulous hero and or villain. So our story has to be like lukewarm and wishy-washy. But I digress. The game's going to have a certain standard of production. It'll be pretty great. So it's probably a safe bet to buy into early on. A lot of people have a lot of faith in CD Projekt Red as a company. I have my reservations. I'm bothered by some stuff they did kind of down there in the stretch, and by the stretch I mean this last year. But you know, it's all about what you do, right? If they release a great game and they reform some business practices, you consider it a success. But CD Projekt Red, you did not release a punk game. You released the aesthetic of a punk game. Philosophically speaking, you did the opposite of what punk is, especially with your viral marketing campaign and thought control through advertisement. And this is the buying a coat that has some cyber crap on it from a Spirit Halloween store and calling yourself punk. That's what's going on there. Again, game could be great. Don't know. Don't care. That's not the point. The point is, you're not punk, and I'm telling everybody.
Hey there, chat gang. It's Mephisto from the future here. I was just thinking more about Cyberpunk 2077 as I, finished out my work day, and I did decide to swing by the game store, support a local business, and pick up my own copy. Now, I was talking very esoterically, philosophically about the game, but I do think it's fair to point out that any video game, it should never be completely lambasted and hated on before it comes out, nor should it receive Game of the Year before you've even played it a moment, like some of the Redditors seem to think it should be, for just thinking it's skinned cool and had great advertising, and, they didn't actually play it yet themselves, but I digress on that. I saw those 8.5 Metacritic scores come in and watch Reddit kind of lose their mind before the game was even out, and I thought that was a little funny. But you don't want to do that same thing the opposite direction either, right? You want to give things a chance. So I decided, obviously I'm not going to give a Game of the Year before I've even touched it myself. And I don't want to just say this is the worst game ever released and what they're doing is something I completely disagree with. So in interest of fairness, I picked it up. Here's my copy right here. I'm going to go ahead and play it and stream it, and be really critical about it, but ultimately open-minded. Wait, in the box, stickers. It comes with free stickers? Oh! Cyberpunk 2077, Game of the Year 2020. You heard it right here. You see, it looks cool because it's got a cosmetics of punk and cyberness, which I love. But most importantly, it's got stickers that are free. And I just already know that I'm going to love it because the stickers are good, and they're in here, and that's really all you need. That's content. That's worth it. That wins. Forget all that philosophy and crap I was talking before. It comes with stickers.
Thank you all for tuning in. Do the likey, subscribey thing that folks are supposed to do on these, and I'll talk to you from my truck later.